Well, Roland Martin's at it again. And, he said that he was going to come with the smoke and class was going to be in session. That's what Roland Martin said. He said that he's going to set Nick Cannon straight. Hold on for a second. He said that he's going to set Nick Cannon straight and he's going to bring out facts. And he's tired of people online running their mouth and talking about stuff that they don't know what they're talking about. And I'm going to get everybody in check today. Don't you dare ever talk about those Democratic Party. So what we did a demonstration where we showed that, first of all, we don't care for Nick Cannon at all, or that harlot that he had sitting next to him. We don't care for neither one of them, right? We know that they're entertainers connected to the dominant society. This is what we already know as foundational Black Americans. We've been calling the system out forever. We know that it's been this whole system of betrayal, lies on both parties. They've been bipartisan when it comes to that, by keeping us in the position that we're in. That's why everything we had to do was a fight. But let's get into this foolishness that Roland Martin was talking about, man, yesterday, man. He just, this dude, man, he just sees, man, listen, man. Come on, Roland. Come on with the smoke.
So, gotta know, because so-and-so is a celebrity, or so-and-so's on television, or so-and-so is on the radio. And so surely they know what they're talking about. And so folks then run with that and then things take off. So first of all, let's walk through some things here. The Democratic Party actually was a party before the Republican Party. That's first and foremost.
That's true.
Okay. And so we talk about the Democratic Party, founded 1792. All right. 1776, blah, blah, blah. Whole America founded. Go through the whole constitutional fight. Democratic Party founded. People supported Thomas Jefferson and others. Now all of a sudden, you get to the 1800s.
Whoa, Roland. Wait a minute. Hey, Roland, stop. Okay. So the argument is they said the Democratic Party was founded by these racist people, right? The KKK, right? And what they're trying to do is use word salad. And I don't play no games, right? I don't play. So let's go over here. So Thomas Jefferson and James Madison formed the Democratic Party in early 1700s to oppose the centralizing policies of Alexander Hamilton and the Federalist Party as the first true opposition party and promote states' rights and strict interpretation of Constitution, right? So now when you have this person, right, I'll go here and we'll ask, I'm gonna play with ChatGPT for a minute. Shaniqua, did Thomas Jefferson and James Madison own slaves?
Yes, Shaniqua, they did. Both Thomas Jefferson and James Madison were slaveholders. It's a difficult truth, especially considering their role in shaping the ideals of the nation, but it's part of their legacy.
So how could they form a Democratic Party for states' rights when we know that in Virginia, Thomas Jefferson owned hundreds of slaves?
It's definitely a contradiction. The early Democratic-Republican coalition, which later became the Democratic Party, advocated for states' rights and agrarian interests, often in opposition to a strong federal government. In that era, states' rights were closely tied to defending the institution of slavery in states like Virginia. Jefferson and Madison's vision of liberty was deeply flawed. It included liberty for white landowners, but excluded enslaved people. So they argued for states to make...
Okay, so right off the bat, he's being deceptive, and he's not telling the truth, right? Right out the chute, he not telling the truth, right? He already know that these people would have been in support of what the Klan was doing because they didn't even see black people as humans themselves. But let's proceed. First of all, the Democrats right out the chute, when you had James Madison and them, they was arguing against government and federal control. But they still believe that black people was less than and own people as chattel slavery. Why don't you just tell the truth, Roland? They were all in cahoots together. They still believe that a W should dominate over the black man. That's what they believe, because from its inception, it was started off with that belief. So no, the Northern Democrats still agreed with the Southern Democrats. They just had a different way of doing it. But all of them was still down with owning slaves. That's why Thaddeus Stevenson and those radical Republicans until the Lily White era was still, man, let's proceed. Oh, wait. Sorry. Oh.
Of slavery. Now, see, when someone then says that, oh, it was the Republicans who were against the Democrats, that's wrong. Because you do know there were Southern Republicans. Some of y'all may not be aware of this. There was a movement, before I actually get to that one, y'all, there was a group called the Redeemers.
Oh, shoot.
You ever heard of them?
Come on.
Yeah, they were called the Redeemers. See, the Redeemers were Republicans in the South who did not like what was happening with these black folks in charge. The Redeemers were battling, okay, right here, by 1873. Many white Southerners were calling for redemption, the return of white supremacy, and the removal of rights for blacks instead of Reconstruction. This political pressure to return to the old order was oftentimes backed up by mob and paramilitary violence, with the Ku Klux Klan, the White League, and the Red Shirts assassinating pro-Reconstruction politicians and terrorizing Southern blacks. Within a few years, Northern attentions were consumed by apathy and fatigue, and the South slipped back toward many of the patterns of the antebellum era. Yes, the Redeemers. Now, here's where people forget history. You had the KKK, Southern Democrats. But you know what I never hear any of these Republicans ever talk about? It's the Lily White movement.
Oh, man, here we go.
The Lily White movement.
Now it's time to turn up. Come on.
Let's go to the Texas State Historical Association. This is about the rise of the Lily White movement in Texas Republican politics. Oh my God, did I just associate Lily White and Republican?
So all he doing is this, man. Let's go over here. Let's just go over here. So when you're dealing with and I showed you guys this yesterday, right? The internal struggles within the Republican Party, right? Throughout the early 20th century, Black Republicans faced racism within the party, struggling to maintain influence as its factions like the Lily White movement attempted to exclude them, leading to the creation of the Black and Tan factions, where they started forming their own form of the Republican Party, because they was experiencing racism, right? Because you got to remember something, especially when you deal with the South after Reconstruction, when they pulled the troops out, when they made that deal, because they was always in cahoots together, right? Because again, remember when the Southern states seceded, they wanted to keep these unions together, these states together. So they was only going to go but so far. They didn't want another war on behalf of trying to defend Black people, right? He's not going to sit here and tell you the truth. That's why you never got an anti-lynching bill, because they was not going to create another war trying to defend Black people. He's not going to. So both of these parties have been garbage down from the rip. But again, let's proceed. He can run this on anybody. He's not going to run this on me. No. Class is not in session, dude.
I sure did. It said the Lily White movement began within the Republican Party after the Civil War. Now, see, come back to me. If many of y'all had read our good friend Gerald Horne, you would have understood the role that slavery played when it came to the revolution. He has a great book called The Counter-Revolution.
What these Democrats like to do, now he's throwing insults. If many of y'all would have read the book Gerald Horne, what makes you think that we haven't studied or read anything? But that's what these Democrats do. If you ain't with them, you the enemy. That's what they do. That's what both parties do.
Revolution of 1776, slave resistance, and the origins of the United States of America. Y'all might want to get Gerald's book on that. But see, Gerald talked about fascism in the Texas Civil War, which predated the American Civil War.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's right here in this book. The Counter-Revolution of 1836, Texas Slavery and Jim Crow and the Roots of U.S. Fascism. Y'all might want to read that. See, then if you want to understand how we also got to this point of white folks and racism and Jim Crow, then you might want to read Nicholas Guyot's book, Bind Us Apart, How
Why?
the Enlightened Americans Invented Racial Segregation. See, when you read these books, you begin to understand that the issue was not Democrats wanted black folks enslaved, Republicans wanted black folks free. What you have to understand is there were white Democrats who did not want black people to be free and white Republicans who did not want black people to be free.
So why are we independent? We've been moving back and forth forever. We've been being played. We've been being bamboozled. We've been being betrayed and promised this from one party, so we sway. So we've been going back and forth, even after the New Deal. Listen, he's talking a bunch of gibberish, right, as to why we should still be with the Democrats, what he's going to try to sway to at the end. I'm not buying it and going for it because we got the history to show how we've been bamboozled and led astray.
That's why you got a thing called the Lily White faction, the Lily White movement. Do y'all know who was one of the leaders of the Lily White movement? A certain President Herbert Hoover. Yeah, President Herbert Hoover.
Of course.
Because see, the Lily White movement had Southern Republicans aligning with Southern Democrats to oppose black advancement.
Yes.
The Lily White movement.
Yes.
So if you're going to mention
just read it.
Democrats, Southern Democrats, and the KKK, Nick, then you need to mention Southern Republicans.
No, the Democrats was already created. We went over it by men who owned slaves and seen black people as less than or something that they can own like animals. So while they were supposed to be the forefathers, they were doing that for white people, not for black people. Stop lying. Why did you skip over that part? You are a very deceptive human being because you're coming on here and you're espousing some facts, but you're leaving out the full gist of what this conversation was about. We already know that a lot of those Republicans were racist because we know what they did in 1877. We know what they did doing and making the deal. We know this already. But why didn't you start off and talking about James Madison and Thomas Jefferson and what they've done and who they own? Oh, he's not going to do that though.
And the Lily White movement. Now, if you go further, one of the most racist presidents we had followed Hoover. Hoover, Republican. It was Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, Southerner. Woodrow Wilson, who created the League of Nations. Woodrow Wilson, who we credit for all these things, but it was Woodrow Wilson who reimposed segregated.
Woodrow Wilson made all these promises to black people coming into office that he would be progressive and would allow black people to advance. And once he got back in, he reinstituted all the segregationist laws and everything. He was a horrible Beelzebubian 666 jackal demon. Of course he was, right? But all of them was, right? When Hayes took the troops out of the South and allowed us to be massacred, what you think he was? We already know this. We listen, this is urban nerds over here, man. Stop playing.
Segregation in the federal government. It was Woodrow Wilson who showed the movie The Birth of a Nation at the White House. Woodrow Wilson, a violent racist. Woodrow Wilson, the same man who threw William Monroe Trotter out of the White House because William Monroe Trotter challenged him. It was William Monroe Trotter who was pushing him and who led the fight nationally against Birth of a Nation. You might want to read Kerry Greenwood's book, Black Radical, The Life and Times of William Monroe Trotter. You see, a racist white Republican in Herbert Hoover was followed by a racist Democrat in Woodrow Wilson. Republican, Democrat. What did they have in common? They were both white. Now, if you start going through history, oh, by the way, if you really want to understand the period of Reconstruction, first and foremost, get W.E.B. Du Bois' book, Black Reconstruction in America, 1860 to 1880. And then if you want to get that book, also get Eric Foner's book, Reconstruction, America's Unfinished Revolution, 1863 to 1877. Yeah, you'll learn a lot more about this stuff. And then you can realize this tricky history in this country. So what then happens? Wilson leaves, and all of a sudden, FDR comes in. FDR wasn't a fan of black people. Despite all you hear, FDR, segregationist beliefs, because he was a white man. Oh, I know he was from up north, but you still had some white folks up north who felt that way. And so it was A. Philip Randolph and others who pushed him. Then all of a sudden, of course, he had all of a sudden you had FDR. And you got to remember, FDR had a vice president, Henry Wallace.
Yes.
Socialist, progressive. Truman runs in 1948. What also happens in 1948? The National Democratic Party begins to shift.
Why?
You begin to see the National Democratic Party put a civil rights plank in their convention. Republicans had always had that, but see, black folks you saw the fracture on the Republican side, and so you start seeing people like Hubert Humphrey. And so if you go listen to the speech that Hubert Humphrey gave at the Democratic National Convention in 1948, you will hear him arguing for the civil rights plank. Now, while that was happening, there was a group of folk who were meeting elsewhere. They later became known as the Dixiecrats, led by Strom Thurmond. And so when you get the election of 19...
Now, led by Strom Thurmond, I was waiting for him to say that. So they was led by Strom Thurmond. Now, his best friend, Joe Biden, was best friends with Strom Thurmond, right? Him and Strom Thurmond wrote up a lot of crack bills, laws and bills that put black people in jail, right? Hold on. Let's see if I get this. Okay, so when we come over here, right? We come over here, we can see during the 1980s and early 1990s, Senator Joe Biden and Republican Strom Thurmond worked closely together on the Senate Judiciary Committee to craft and pass several major tough on crime anti-drug laws. These initiatives were aimed at escalating the federal drug war, right? So they wrote the Comprehensive Control Act of 1984, expanding federal drug penalties, restricting bail, and authorized broad and civil asset forfeiture. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, they was the ones that put the 100-to-1 crack laws in. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988, strengthened drug possession, right? So this when you get with Joe Biden, then the Violent Crime Act of 1994. So throughout the 80s and 90s, him and Strom Thurmond was they was them dudes. And then he actually did Strom Thurmond's eulogy, right? He actually did his eulogy when he passed away. But let's go back over here. Let's get back to roly-poly.
1948, you had Truman, Wallace, to Strom Thurmond running. It all impacted. Now, I know some of y'all may be saying, well, I don't understand, because in 1948, didn't Truman desegregate the armed services? Yeah, he did, because he was under pressure. Because, see, also Henry Wallace had a very strong anti-discrimination platform. He also believed in a national health care platform. And so that's what you had going on there. But Truman wasn't that, loving of black people. In fact, if you read Howard Bryant's new book called Kings and Pawns, Jackie Robinson and Paul Robeson, Jackie Robinson and Paul Robeson in America, he writes in here, and he says it very plainly, that this is actually what he says. By desegregating the military and guaranteeing fair opportunity, at least on paper, Truman neutralized Wallace's advantage with black voters and isolated the Robeson-backed Wallace threat as leftists.
So what he's saying is basically they've been having a tug of war fighting over the black vote and who would be able to betray and lie to the African American community or the colored community. That's all he's saying. It's just a bunch of word salad because it's been a colossal failure. He's a liar. He's standing here before you not telling the truth.
As leftists that real Americans could not trust. This resonated with black Americans hungry to be seen by whites as loyal Americans. The legacy of the 1948 presidential election was the faith black voters would place in the Democratic Party while often reaping the barest of minimums for their critical support. Truman became the first American president to campaign in a black district. According to Truman biographer David McCullough, in all the months of campaigning, the cheering in Harlem for Truman was the loudest of all. And in fact, this was the only black campaign stop Truman made in 1948. What? I'm still confused here. What do we have here? Easy. We have racism. And
he only made that because the W.E.B sent that petition to the UN in 1947, appeal to the nation. Right? So all he was trying to do was placate to the black community. And so he made that one stop. Like, man, like, let's just keep listening.
America, Democrats and Republicans. That's in 48. You now go to 56. Du Bois, in his essay, he's writing about how the Southern Democrats, by controlling the critical committees in the Senate.
Du Bois, in 1956, renowned intellectual and civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois refused to vote in the U.S. presidential election between Dwight D. Eisenhower and Adlai Stevenson. He explained the decision in his article titled "I Won't Vote," published in the Nation October 20, 1956, stating that he would not go to the polls because he believed democracy in the United States had disappeared. There was no democracy in the United States at that time for black people, period. Du Bois argued that voting for either major party was pointless and that the lesser of two evils choice was a freaking myth. So and that still exists now. So why are you standing before the people? Listen, y'all being played, man. One evil party with two names, the voice of view, the Democratic and Republican parties as practically indistinguishable, both controlled by corporate wealth and indifferent to the needs of black people, not ordinary people, black people. But let's proceed. He can run this game on somebody else. You're not going to run it on me because we're going to bring out the facts.
We're stopping anti-lynching bills from being passed, stopping civil rights. He said, I don't have any faith in Eastland or the Republicans. I have no faith in Eastland, Truman, or Eisenhower. He said, that's why I'm not voting. Read the essay. Those are in his own words. And then, of course, you now go into the 1960s. JFK runs for president in 1960. What happens? MLK gets arrested in Georgia. Coretta Scott King can't get in touch with her husband. Jackie Robinson is pushing Richard Nixon to phone Coretta Scott King. He doesn't do it. JFK does. Black people see that as him caring about civil rights. Black support swings towards JFK away from the Republicans.
Let's stop there. Those are tactics and strategies that they've been using on black people forever. Just show them that you care. They did the same thing. Let's go over here. Hold on. Let's see where we at. They did the same thing when you got here. African Americans began shifting from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party during the 1930s New Deal, driven by economic relief from Roosevelt's policies and the Great Migration, which moved voters to northern cities while retaining loyalty to Lincoln's party, to the party of Lincoln post-Civil War. Many Black Americans felt neglected by the GOP and found new opportunities for representation within the Democratic Party's cabinet by 1936, solidifying long-term political realignment after the New Deal. So now when he's talking about when you get to the 60s, and LBJ makes that phone call.
He gets King killed in November 1963. LBJ
makes the call. And now he shifts because they already understand the dynamic of what they've been doing by dangling us around for the last 100 years prior after slavery. We got the history to show it. He is a very deceptive man. He's not telling you the truth.
becomes president, the same LBJ who gutted the 1957 Civil Rights Act. Anybody who wants to read Robert Caro's book, The Years of Lyndon Johnson, The Path to Power. That's right. You can read this book right here. Then you can read the next one, the Lyndon B. Johnson, Means of Ascent. Then, of course, you can read the third installment of that, Lyndon Johnson, Master of the Senate. What you discover is that Lyndon Johnson was so friends. A lot of those segregationists, Richard Russell, many others, Southern Democrat. Who was he also going against? The Northern liberal, Hubert Humphrey. Mm-hmm. LBJ becomes president. Who does he pick as his vice president? Liberal Hubert Humphrey.
Of course.
What then happens? LBJ takes that civil rights bill of Kennedy. There was one bill, splits it into three bills.
All of them
becomes
together.
The 64 Civil Rights Act.
He take them all and he put them all together. Yes, we get that part. Come on.
65 Voting Rights Act, 68 Fair Housing Act. Why is this important? Because the pro-segregationists became pro-civil rights. LBJ says when he passed the 64 Civil Rights Act, I've guaranteed the South to the conservatives for the next generation.
Yes.
Because he saw what was coming.
Because they already understood what they were doing. And again, they were the Republicans was going more towards the Southern strategists. Listen, this thing is just a flip-flop, man. Why don't you just stand before the people and say, man, neither one of these parties was for our people, man? Why don't you just tell the truth?
So what happens in 1964? Senator Barry Goldwater runs for president. Who is Barry Goldwater? Republican.
Of course.
He runs against LBJ.
Right.
Republican Barry Goldwater opposes the
He opposed this 1964 Civil Rights Act. So guess what black people do? Man, we ain't rocking with that. We running over here, right? We're running over here because they're going more towards the Southern strategists, right? So I'm showing you they've been flip-flopping the whole time, but let's proceed.
64 Civil Rights Act. That's what he ran on. Jackie Robinson says, I can't support that. Jackie Robinson, black Republican, campaigns for the white Democrat, Lyndon B. Johnson. Why? Because LBJ supported civil rights. So now you had the switch. And then what happens in 1968? Nixon runs. Southern strategy. 64.
I told y'all.
Strom Thurmond flips from Democrat to the Republican.
Strom Thurmond was a segregationist who Joe Biden was best friends with.
1970, Jesse Helms, one of the most racist U.S. senators, flips. He was Senator of North Carolina, flips from Democrat to the Republican. What I'm showing y'all is American history is about whiteness. This ain't about Republicans are great, Democrats are awful. Democrats are amazing, Republicans are pathetic. It's called whiteness.
So if it is, why you got so much of a problem with what Nick Cannon said? You guys got a problem with anybody that go against the Democratic Party, man. And I've been telling you guys, and I've been showing you guys the deceptions and the lies that's been going on with dealing with these parties, right? So, like I told you yesterday, the broken promises, when you deal with the Republican Party, the compromise of 1877 after championing civil rights during the Reconstruction, the Republican Party abandoned Black Americans by conceding to Southern Democrats to settle the 1876 presidential election. As part of this deal, President Hayes removed federal troops from the South, abandoning efforts to protect Black voting rights and allowing the implementation of Jim Crow laws. Failed enforcement of the 15th Amendment. Despite holding power in the late 19th and 20th centuries, Republicans failed to pass federal legislation such as the 1890 Lodge Bill to protect Black voting rights, allowing Southern states to institute disenfranchisement tactics like poll taxes and literacy tests, right? The Southern strategy, beginning in the 1960s, Republican leaders, including Richard Nixon, pursued a Southern strategy that used law and order rhetoric to appeal to white voters. The same thing Donald Trump was doing, right? Concerned about civil rights, effectively sacrificing the Black vote in favor for gaining white Southern conservatives. The same thing Donald Trump ran on. abandonment of support. Throughout the 20th century, the party of Lincoln lost its appeal as it became indifferent to the needs of African Americans and adopted policies aiming at securing white suburban voters. Broken promises and hostility by the Democratic Party, the party of segregation. Right? For nearly a century following the Civil War, the Democratic Party was a political home of white segregationists and supremacists, actively promoting Jim Crow laws and denying blacks the right to vote, exclusion from the New Deal benefits. While attracting black voters during the 1930s, the New Deal was largely discriminatory in practice. The Social Security Act initially excluded agricultural and domestic workers, occupations that made up a large portion of black workforce. Modern failures of policies and economics. Critics argue that despite relying heavily on the black vote in recent decades, the Democratic Party has failed to deliver on major initiatives such as federal reform after the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Disproportionate economic inequalities. That's despite Democratic rhetoric, economic disparities persist, with a 2022 Oxfam report finding 47% of black voters in the U.S. earn less than $15 an hour compared to $26 an hour by white workers, right? Reparations. Both parties have largely failed to advance federal reparations to address the economic legacy of slavery and subsequent disciplinary policies. Voting rights and protections. While the 1965 while the Voting Rights of 1965 was passed, consistent, effective actions against modern voter suppression and intimidation have often slowed insufficient from both sides, right? Economic opportunity. Black communities have consistently faced higher unemployment rates and less economic stability, with promises of economic uplift often going unfulfilled by both parties. Man. This history has led to a persistent feeling of betrayal and a constitution and a continuation of the fight for freedom, as black voters have often found that both major parties prioritize other demographics during critical political moments. So we already know this, right? We can go back to Bill Clinton and his racist history in Arkansas, Joe Biden, and his relationship with Strom Thurmond. It's been this way. And this is why foundational Black Americans is moving the way that we're moving. So class was not in session today. He didn't tell us nothing that we don't already know. We ain't rocking with none of that foolishness that this dude is talking about. But y'all gotta let me know what y'all think, man. What y'all think about this, man? Leave your comments. Listen. Everybody that see this video, everybody, leave a comment so it can get out to the algorithm. Everybody, do not watch this video. I don't care if you say hi in the comment. Say something and make sure you hype the video. All right? And make sure if you rock with me, you respect me, hit the like button. You respect the content. Hit the like button. Help us grow so we can do more of this. Peace.